chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace.
That's it. Good evening, planet Earth, and welcome to the Good News program. And tonight we have a very special guest. A little bit of memory lane. We come from the same town. We have a lot of the same friends. Went to the same schools. And he's much older than I am, though. Jim Driscoll. Jim, thank you for coming over here tonight. And
Thanks, Bill.
Jim is a former Major League player, and today he's a Major League revivalist. And my name is Mickey Mantle. And
Wait a minute. Hold it. If you believe that, I've got some oceanfront property in Nebraska I want to sell you.
All right.
We rehearsed that.
Yeah. Listen, television land, my name is Bill Robinson. You know that if you watch the program. And it's about testimonies. And testimonies are impacting how God's impacted people so many different times, so many different ways. We're very unique. And Jim has a fantastic story to tell. But I'm going to tell you how I got reconnected with Jim. I remember his family from Arlington. I remember the name. I didn't know them, but Arlington had, wall-to-wall Irish guys. So, everybody's sort of related. And so I knew the name. But I saw about a month ago or 2 months ago, he was giving his testimony in New Hampshire. And now, being a Massachusetts guys in New Hampshire, we've still got a mindset that we think of cows and stuff like that, but I know it's changed for you New Hampshire people. So I said, you know what? Something said, I got to go hear this. I want to hear this story. And that's how, how do we get hooked up? It's the Holy Spirit that hooks us up. And he does something inside and say, hey, get that guy on the program. He's got a story. So I went up and I listened to it and I said, hey, you got to come down and we're going to do an interview with you, 2 interviews, and you can tell them, your life story, how you got played in the major leagues, and what you're doing now. And it'll touch people's hearts. So I'm just going to tell them a little bit about, I wish that we had a teleprompter here, because then I'd look like, Uncle Sid Roth, and I'd look smart, but Jimmy, I don't have one.
It's all right.
And not being the brightest light in the barn, but I want to tell you, a testimony reveals the nature of God and how he moves in people's lives in the different way he does it. It's amazing. It creates in the people that watch the show an expectation for God's ways to be manifested in their lives, whether it's, whether they feel it on the surface or it just falls on them. Now, the only Hebrew that I know, other than the baloney and all that stuff, is that the word testimony means he wants to do it again. So when people hear your testimony, it's going to rub off on them, and it has creative power to do what is declared in it. So you say, well, yeah, that's for you out there. Let me tell you a story. This is a true story. In South Africa, there's a place, it's got a name about this long. It's canyons, like the Grand Canyon. They got them over there. And there's a couple that are up there on vacation. They're taking a walk, and they meet this conservation agent. And she said, have you got a minute? And they said, yeah, sure. Let me tell you about the black eagle that we had come up from the zoo in Pretoria and what happened. And they said, yeah, sure. She said, well, we were all excited. This eagle had been in captivity for 10 years, and they shipped it up here in a crate. We took it out of the crate, and we're all excited. We're going to see the eagle fly. The eagle gets out of the crate. He doesn't move. She said, all day long, we tried to coax the eagle. Couldn't move. Wouldn't move. She said, we're getting extremely frustrated. Then all of a sudden, we saw the eagle move. And we looked in the distance, and we could see a free eagle flying. And he heard the call of the free eagle. He saw the eagle. He takes off and begins to fly. The message is, he didn't need flying lessons. When he saw freedom, he took off. And that's what you're going to hear tonight. Some of you, like I tell people, Jimmy, you can go to church till the cows come home. Or I can move into my garage. I'm not going to become an automobile or stick my head in the oven and become a pizza. It's something that Jesus does and touches you, and you had that experience, dude. And that's what we're going to share. How God took an average guy out of Arlington and inch by inch over the years, like fine-tuned sandpaper, sanded it down. That's why you're here. So the Mickey Mantle thing, I got number 7 on my back. I'm not really Mickey Mantle. He's my favorite, and we're going to talk about his, later on, we're going to talk about his testimony. This guy's probably brought more people to the Lord dead than anybody ever has alive. He's tremendous. So, there you go. So, Jim, Arlington, Mass, 9 kids in the family?
Let me take it from there.
Go ahead. Go, kid. Run.
First of all, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be on the air. I'm happy to be here with my lovely wife, Caroline, who's operating one of the cameras here. She didn't know she could, but now she's doing it. But anyway, right off the bat, I'd much rather be talking about Jesus and the Holy Spirit than I am about baseball, which is my background. I love talking about baseball, don't get me wrong, and I'll tell you a few stories as we go. But Jesus is the most important thing in my life in present time, and is looming larger and bigger and better. But yes, I'm from Arlington, Mass, same hometown as Bill.
Other famous people we haven't got time to,
Yeah, we were famous for at least 20 minutes in Arlington. But I grew up in Arlington and from a large family. I'm one of 9 children, second oldest of 9. And I like to name them off just quickly when I get the opportunity. And it goes like this: Joe, Jimmy, Kathy, Patty, Mark, Kevin, Paul, and Brian, the Driscolls. And it seemed like any time we'd have a picture taken of us, we'd all line up in our respective ages right down the line. And I'll put this up here. This is a photo from Boston Common on Easter Sunday, 1958. And you can see my father here, my mother, Joe, Jimmy, Kathy, Patty, Mark, Kevin, Paul, Brian, and Mary, in that order. And it was an athletic family we grew up in. And my father, just to give my father a little shout out here, he was an athlete himself. He participated, but he wasn't like a star, but he was good enough to make the teams. And I have a picture of him here in 1938. Playing for Bridgeton Academy. Bridgeton, it's like a prep school in Maine. And he grew up from Somerville, Mass. And he played left field. And here's my father right here, Joe Driscoll, an athlete. And he passed it on to us. Just one other quick picture of him in the dormitory. And this is my father right here in this shot. You can see the knickers. He was always sharp. You see the shirt and tie on him. And he was always sharp as a tack. My father. And he always told us to keep a shine on your shoes and your name in the papers. And that was his message to us. And then, just to give you a little background on my baseball career, I was the youngest player ever to play left field for the Red Sox. And I've got proof to show you right here. I'm going to turn this picture around. I was 4 years old at Fenway playing left field. You can see the green monster. It's the same signs that they have out there now at Fenway. 4 years old. Wow.
You going to tell them about Williams or what?
Yes, and that same day, very same day that this picture was taken, I have another picture that was taken that same day, and I'll turn that around, and I'll show you this. The very same day. My father was an usher at Fenway Park, and we were in there early, and my father called Ted Williams over, and he came over, and he asked him to take a picture of myself and my brother Joe, and here's myself here on Ted's right, and my brother Joe on his left at Fenway, that same day as that 4-year-old picture was taken.
Wow.
And now, just to jump ahead to continue this story, I was playing in the majors with, well, let me, I don't want to jump to the majors yet, because we got other stuff.
Tell them the story. It's okay.
Okay, tell them the story.
You were with the Athletics.
I was with the Oakland Athletics and infielder, and I was traded to the Washington Senators. And that winter, the Washington Senators moved to Texas to become the Texas Rangers. And who was the manager of the Washington Senators? None other than Ted Williams. So my father sends this picture down to me, down in Texas, and I waltz it into Ted, and Ted said, "Ted, will you sign this?" And he did sign it, as you can see. He said, "To Jim, all the hard work paid off. Your friend Ted Williams." Well, he got such a kick out of it, he called the press, they brought out another photographer, and they took this picture of Ted and I together as Rangers, as you can see on the bottom. 25 years later.
Yeah. Wow.
And as the headline goes, second time around, Williams, Driscoll renew acquaintances. It's quite a story. It took 25 years to develop, but a story nonetheless, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
And then the famous Ted Williams.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
So now let me just fast forward it here. Went to Arlington High School.
Went to Arlington High.
And you were a three-sport star.
Went to Arlington High, and in those days, you'd play whatever, if you were athletically inclined, you'd play whatever sport was in season. So in the fall, we'd play football, and in the winter, we'd play basketball, and in the summer, we'd play baseball. And I was a pretty good athlete. And it was a God-given ability that I had, a gift from God to have hand-eye coordination.
Yep.
And you're either have it or you don't. You're born with it. And I was, early on in my life, I discovered that I had it.
I like what you told me earlier, though. You told me that your father recognized this, and he said, you just thank God he's given it to you, and use it for his glory.
Use it for his glory, and don't get puffy, is the word he used. It's a gift from God. You go out and you don't flaunt it. You go out and you give your best effort, and leave everything on the field after the game, and let the chips fall where they may.
Wow.
And that's what I did, especially in baseball, for the simple reason that baseball it's a humbling sport. It can humble you quickly.
Yeah.
For instance, you might be in the seventh inning and hit a home run for your team to put your team ahead, but then 2 innings later in the ninth, you might make an error to let 2 runs in for your team to lose the game. So you've gone from hero to GOAT in about 20 minutes. So the secret is to stay at even keel. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And my father showed me that lesson early. And it did me well all during my career.
Yep.
I never got puffy. I can happily say that I got that great information.
Actually, that's foundational. You know, it might work in the secular life, but it also works over here now.
Sure.
It works so much when, you know, I introduced you as a big league revivalist. That's you're sharing your testimony here, there, and other places. And it's a privilege. And it's not like, you know, wow, I just did this, I'm going on my TV. Are you kidding me? It's such a privilege. And, you know, we talked earlier. I mean, when we came into this, you begin to realize this, that, you know, we're only passing through, Jim. You know, we're not going to be here forever. But in the meantime, if he uses us, it's great. So you graduated, and what is it, graduation that night you signed?
1962, graduated from Arlington High. At 7 o'clock was the graduation. And then by 10:30, I signed my first professional baseball contract with the Milwaukee Braves. And then there were the Milwaukee Braves, and they're now the Atlanta Braves because they relocated to Atlanta. But for you New Englanders, they started out as the Boston Braves.
Yep.
Moved to Milwaukee, then eventually moved to Atlanta where they are now.
Yep.
But signed a contract, and I got a picture here of that night that I signed my first professional contract. And here's the Driscolls, all now in order again: Joe, Jimmy, Kathy, Patty, Mark, Kevin, Paul, and Brian. But here's me here, holding the contract.
And they shipped you off to where, Georgia?
And my first team that I signed, and I went to Dublin, Georgia. I'd never been out of Arlington, Mass. All of a sudden, I'm in the red clays of Georgia, 50 miles south of Atlanta. You can't get there from here, the guy said, when I arrived in Atlanta. So we got to the ballpark, and the mosquitoes, which is the state bird of Georgia, were bigger than the baseballs. The pop-up went up in the lights, and you look up, and the mosquitoes are bigger than the ball. You don't know where to look. But that was the start of my professional career.
Wow.
And it was a real eye-opener. I've mentioned this before in other testimonies I've given, but when I got down to Atlanta, to Dublin, I noticed in right field, all the blacks were in right field, and all the white folks were behind home plate. And then I noticed blacks only restroom, blacks only water fountains, and I couldn't comprehend what was going on. So somebody clued me in quickly that segregation was at its height. This was 1962, before the march of Martin Luther King to Selma, Alabama, from Selma. So it was a rude awakening, really. You had to grow up fast. You know, you were a high school star and athlete, the best in your hometown, but now you're amongst men from all over the world that were worldly already.
Yeah.
And I come in still wet behind the ears, and you learn fast. Some of the things I didn't learn that fast, but eventually got around to learning them.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to do it all over again, you'd have done it a little differently.
Yeah. So you spent 7 years in the minors.
Spent 7 years in the minors, and wound up getting drafted actually from the Braves organization to the Athletics. And in those days, it was the Kansas City Athletics.
Right there, the Athletics.
Kansas City A's.
Great.
And they moved from Kansas City to become the Oakland A's, which they are now, and that's what this shirt represents. And I'm playing in Des Moines, AAA ball, one step away from the majors. And I was having a pretty good season. And I'll just give you another quick story. My brother Mark, who was a second baseman, a little younger than me, was at the University of Arizona playing second base for that team, and they were qualified for the College World Series, which was being played in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yep.
90 miles from Des Moines, where I was playing. 4 of my other brothers flew to Omaha to see Mark play in the College World Series. Well, as it turned out, they lost their first 2 games and they were out of the tournament. So Mark had to leave with the team to go back to Arizona, but my other 4 brothers jumped in a car, rented it, and drove over to Des Moines, Iowa, where brother Jimmy was playing. Well, the night they got there, as it turns out, I wrapped a double off the wall to drive in the winning run in the 9th inning to be the hero for the night. So after the game, we went out, bite to eat, and then back to the apartment in Des Moines. The name of the apartment, ironically, was the Cape Cod Apartments in Des Moines, Iowa. Well, anyway, we had wall-to-wall Driscolls, floor, couch, any way you could find a spot. And went to bed, and the phone rang. This is a great story. The phone rang the very next morning, and I answered it. It was around 7 o'clock. And there was a voice on the other end of the phone claiming to be a sports writer for the Des Moines Register that wanted to do a story on me for my heroics the night before. And it was going to be for the afternoon paper. Well, it wasn't a sports writer at all from the Des Moines Register. It was the owner of the Oakland Athletics, Charles O. Finley. And I recognized his voice. I said, "Charlie, I know it's you," because I had met him in spring training and recognized his voice. He got a kick out of the fact that I exposed him as not the sports writer. So here's the line he used on me. I'll never forget it. I can hear it ringing in my ear right at the moment. "How would you like to be wearing a pair of white spikes tonight?"
Can I ask you a question? Why did they use white spikes?
Well,
he was kind of crazy.
He was flamboyant.
Yeah.
And, he was like, he had a carnival feel about him, like Bill Veeck, if anybody remembers him.
Yeah, you.
And he had the green and gold uniforms. We had 3 color uniforms: California Seafoam Green, Wedding Gown White, and Fort Knox Gold, as he described them. And he said to me, how'd you like to be wearing a pair of white spikes tonight? And I knew that was the call to the majors. I says, yep. He said, okay. He said, be in Detroit tonight for the game, 7:30. So now I hang up the phone. I go downstairs to wake up my brothers to tell them I'm going to the major leagues. Holy cow, I'm going to the big leagues. They said to me, you're dreaming, go back to bed. They thought I was pulling their leg. Anyway, I picked up the phone. I called my dad back in our dad back in Boston, and let him know that, yes, indeed, I was going to the majors.
Wow.
And then the boys realized that you're not fooling, you're going.
Wow. We
all packed up, boarded a plane in Des Moines, and we're off to the big leagues in Detroit. I like to refer to it, I'm dating myself here, but there was a movie way back in the day called The Fighting Sullivans. It was about the 5 Sullivan brothers that joined the Navy. Yeah. And they all traveled together. It was like the Fighting Driscolls on the way to Detroit. We got to Detroit and went to the ballpark, and there in the locker room, the visiting room, was my locker with my uniform, number 21, with Driscoll in the back, written. And I knew right then that, yes, indeed, I had made it to the majors.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I like what you said earlier, Jim. You said, like your dad said to you, don't get puffed up. God gave you this ability, right? And so how does that translate today? Yeah, most of us never made the major leagues. We didn't have that kind of talent. Some of us worked hard. It still didn't make any difference. But today, like, you know, as we introduce you to it as a big league revivalist, what you need is not the physical talent. You need the hunger that he says you have the hunger for the lost. Sure. Yeah, and that's what it is. When you get to know Jesus, like you said in the beginning, I remember you saying all these pictures are great memories, but the main thing is that Jesus Christ came into my life and changed it drastically. Not that you were a bad guy, but you were a guy that thought everything was the way it is.
Sure.
And that's what, you know, that's why when I tell people about that story with the free eagle, that poor eagle didn't know that he wasn't in the cage. You know, so many people, they go in and out of churches, they don't go anymore. They don't know they're free. Now, when you come to the Lord and you start to walk with him, you say, wow, I get some real freedom here. You know, he gives you everything. And we tell people, when you ask him into your life, personally, then you get authority. But when you have an experience, an encounter, you have the power. Same power that raised Jesus from the dead is alive within you and me. You say, that's extraordinary. He's an extraordinary God. You know, that's fantastic. You're now in the big leagues. And, you know, we only get a few minutes left on this program, but on the next program, we're going to talk about how that scenario played out, how you got to meet Jesus. But in the meantime, you're living with these guys on a day-to-day basis. Some guys are probably great guys, other guys are jerks. That's the way it is. That's planet Earth. We're in a war zone. But all the way through that, God had a plan for you. He saw this. He looked down the tunnel of time, which he doesn't have, and says, hey, Driscoll, I got you lined up. You're going to play in the real big leagues. And he said, whoa. Yeah, that's what he's got a plan. We have the choice of not cooperating with him, making some stupid thinking that this planet is real. No, it's a war zone. And he looked down and he says, Jimmy, you're going to be here, you're going to be there, you're going to meet a princess that's going to change your life. And that's what it's all about. We said that in the beginning. It's like, he's crazy. And, you know, the next time when we get into the next program, we're going to talk about that, how you met Carolyn, who's on the camera right now. She's helping us out tonight. An amazing story. But in the meantime, we're still talking baseball here. How many years did you spend in Oakland?
I spent 9 years with the organization, but I spent a total of 14 years in professional ball.
Wow.
Yeah, 14 years. The game remains the same. The players are different, but the game itself remains. It's still a wonderful game. It remains the same because to play there, you have to be able to throw it, hit it, catch it with the best in the world in order to stay there. but it's still a pure game, baseball. The money's changed. To give you an example of the money that's changed hands. When I played in the majors, the highest paid players like Hank Aaron, Harmon Killebrew, Tony Oliva, guys like that, they were making $125,000. Pretty good money in the late 60s, early 70s. Well, fast forward to 2016, the least you can make, the very least you can make if you're in the majors is $500,000 a year, minimum.
Yeah, that's nice.
If you put a couple of good years together, you're going to jump up. They're going to sign you for a 4 or 5 year contract worth $8 to $10 million a year.
Right.
And if you're a superstar, you're making $20 million a year.
Right.
Well, the money's not that the players are that much better, but the money is coming from the contract that Major League Baseball has signed with TV, the networks.
Yeah.
With the rights to broadcast the games. They just signed a deal with the networks for $7 billion. And the Major League teams divide that up, and that's where they're getting the big money now.
But you know what this book says? My daddy's got more money than the whole world together. He don't need it.
Exactly.
He's owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. By the way, this is the Bible called the Manufacturer's Handbook. Really. We'll get into that later, but this is what he says. You follow this along, read it. I don't read this as a manual for morality. I read it to hear the voice of God, and he speaks to us. So, what you're under contract for today, it's going to make those guys that are getting $200 million, $150 million. That's nothing, because you're doing big league revival for what he's giving you. So I'm going to give the people a chance right now in the privacy of their own home, Jim, to do what you did. One day, and we're going to get into it, which is a fabulous story. But, you know, you're hearing all the story, and you're looking at the scenario of how Jim walked through this, but everything was building one thing upon another, and like we said, Jesus looked down the time tunnel and said, someday, brother, you're going to make those big contracts look like nothing because you're going to be working for me.
Exactly.
And you got it, you know. So out there in television land, we're going to give you the opportunity. You wrap your own words around it. But it simply comes down to this. I'm not going to give you a formula. I'm not going to give you 12 principles or the 14 steps of this or that. Just say, hey, Jesus, I don't understand everything, but I want some of the peace that this guy's got. I want a piece of that action. All you got to do is say, Jesus, you know, come into my life. You know, I've screwed up. I made a mess of things, and I'm sorry. But just come in. And the thing is, you know, don't put them up on the mantelpiece with the rest of your gods. And this ain't fire insurance. This is the real stuff. And you know what? Take the 30-day trial offer. If you do that every night, well, I'm not sure. You drive a car. You don't know how it works. You turn the key to the right and you go. Just ask him. Say, hey, Lord, I don't understand this. I guarantee you can take it to the bank at the end of 30 days. He will show up and give you the opportunity. James, we're going to go part 2 coming up and out there in television land. You have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, it's great.
Enjoyed it.